Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1363, and today's date is August 24th, 2017, and the title of the episode is Germany and U.S. Strangely Broadcast Messages About Gold Holdings. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, as we follow each economic indicator, we're starting to realize that it's not just isolated to the United States, and we've proven it many, many times, where this is all happening in every single country, and a lot of these countries are in a huge amount of debt. They have high unemployment. Retail sales are declining, and we're getting a report from the UK, and the data is from the Confederation of British Industry, and they're showing that UK retail sales, they've dropped at the fastest pace since July of 2016. And what we're seeing right now from the data is showing that 34% of the retail said the sale volumes were up in August on a year ago, while 44% said they were down. And what we're seeing right now is the UK retailers, they are seeing falling sales, and they're not seeing the gains that they've been seeing before, and they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what is going on. Here in the United States, we are seeing the same exact thing. Sears, for instance, their sales have plunged by 11.5%. Traffic is drying up. They're going to be closing another 28 stores. And we need to remember what the CEO of Dick's said. They are in panic mode right now because they're starting to realize that these high prices, people just don't want to pay for them. And yes, they are going to be looking at different stores, online retailers. But what is happening right now is that people just don't have the funds to go out and purchase these goods. Sears is seeing the same store sales plunge by 11.5%. This is worse than expected. They expected a 7.1% decline, and it is much, much worse. So what we're seeing right now is that retail is still declining. It's getting worse. It's not improving. People are not going and saying, okay, I'm not going to shop in the retail stores, I'm going to be going online. What we're seeing is that people who are, and of course these people that are losing their jobs, the people that are taking part-time jobs, they just don't have the funds. This is why we see all of this happening. It has nothing to do with the weather, the solar eclipse, or anything else. And I know the corporate media has been trying to explain this away of why this is happening. And Sears came out with why they think this is happening. Now, the company blamed a retail environment that remained challenging with continued softness in store traffic and elevated price competition. Well, yes, traffic is drying up because people don't have the money. Prices, they are way too high because people don't have that discretionary funds to go out and purchase these goods. So yes, these are true, but why is this happening? They always leave that part out. It's happening because the economy is breaking down. And we've been looking at this for quite a while. I mean, if we go back a couple of years when we said the holiday season was going to be absolutely awful and retail sales were going to be down, guess what? Each year after that, it has come true. It's gotten worse and worse and worse until this year where we see stores by the thousands, well, they're closing down. We've been talking about real estate, how this is a complete and utter disaster. Even the corporate media right now is picking up on it, and they're looking at the situation saying that, California right now is in crisis mode. And first we had new home sales where they decline. Now we're seeing existing home sales. They fell back to negative 2.0% in June and negative 1.3% in July. Now remember, the summer months are supposed to be the great time for real estate. Why? Because, first of all, it's summer. We've come out of winter. People want to be in their new homes before their children start school. It's easier to move into the homes, and normally between the months of April and the months of September, real estate does very, very well. Once we enter the winter months, guess what? Things start to really fall apart. And here we are entering September, and they're telling us that June and July were awful. So we have new home construction down. We have existing home sales down. Pending home sales down. This winter is going to be a complete disaster. Now, Pam Martins and Russ Martins, they looked into corporate debt. And they're saying that corporate debt threatens the U.S. economic prospects. Now, according to a recent study, U.S. corporations, their debt level, well, they could pose some serious headwinds for the United States economy in the next major downturn. Why is this? Well, we need to go back to April. The IMF announced that they see some red flags. They're saying that the U.S. corporate sector has added around $7.8 trillion in debt and other liabilities since 2010. Of course, this is what happened during this recovery process. And among the S&P 500 firms, median net debt is close to an historic high of more than 1.5 times earnings. Now, if we look at nearly 4,000 firms accounting for about half of the economy-wide corporate sector balance sheets, we see that there is a rise in leverage across almost all sectors to levels exceeding those prevailing just before, yes, the 2008 global financial crisis. Now, debt is very high right now in energy, real estate, utility sectors, ranging between 4 and 6 times earnings. And we need to understand what these corporations have been doing, because much of the debt that has been sold by companies in the last couple of years, guess what? It has been used to buy back their own shares, pay out higher dividends, or finance big mergers and acquisitions. Well, these buybacks funded by cheap borrowing have boosted earnings. A missing ingredient has been spending on investment to build their business. So they bought back these shares with this cheap debt because the interest rates are very, very low. And they boosted their earnings, which is not the same as revenue and sales, but they haven't built their businesses up. So now they're on the hook for all this debt without increasing their revenue and sales. Why didn't they increase their revenue and sales? Because they couldn't. Look at Caterpillar. Look at IBM. Look at all these corporations. They're having a very difficult time. What they could do, and what they did do, is they bought back their shares and made their companies look fantastic. And when it all falls apart, everyone's going to be looking at this saying, what just happened here? So we're approaching the same thing that happened prior to the financial crisis of 2008. The corporations have done the same exact thing, and we heard Bear Stearns, Lehman, AIG, GM, Chrysler, and many other corporations. Well, we found out that pretty much all these corporations, they're bankrupt. They should have been out of business a long time ago. Now, we know that Steve Mnuchin, he visited Fort Knox. And he went and visited Fort Knox with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, and Kentucky Congressman Brett Guthrie. And they looked at the gold storage. And of course, Mnuchin said, yes, everything is there. Don't worry, the gold is safe. And we reported that something is kind of strange about this whole situation, because there has been a Treasury Secretary to visit the gold vaults in like 70 years or so. Now, there is about 4,583 tons of gold in Fort Knox. Well, allegedly. Now, the media, they were not alerted to this visit. They weren't invited. There's no pictures. Well, there's no pictures allowed in Fort Knox anyhow. But the media, they weren't really told about this, which is kind of strange right off the bat. Now, there are 13 different chambers within Fort Knox, and each chamber has a seal, and inside is gold. Now, what we've seen is that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he held a 27-pound gold bar in his hands, saying that, look, here's the gold, everything is great. Now, they went into one area. They broke the seal, they went in, and they said gold was there. There's no pictures. The other 12 compartments, they never even looked in. Does this prove that the gold is there? No, it does not. It just says that they went into one compartment, they showed us one bar of gold, and they're trying to convince the American people that everything is fine. Now, Jim Rickards is saying that our gold in Fort Knox, he's saying that it's still there. Now, I don't know this for sure. A lot of people are saying absolutely not. And this is why the central banks have been raiding the gold vaults of different countries like Libya, like Ukraine, and they've been using this gold to send off to other places like Germany, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But he went on to say that during the Great Depression in 1933, Roosevelt issued an executive order requiring anyone with gold to surrender it to the Federal Reserve or any member bank of the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank also required the commercial banks to hand over their gold to the Fed. Now, suddenly the gold went out of the commercial banks into the Federal Reserve Bank, but under the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the Fed was ordered to surrender all of its gold to the Treasury Department. So all the nation's gold, in effect, came under direct government ownership. Now, this is the key. The Federal Reserve is actually, again, a private system, a private corporation, while the Treasury is an arm of the U.S. government. And the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution prevents the government from taking private property without just compensation. To get around this just compensation, they issued a gold certificate to the Fed in exchange for the physical gold. So if you take the face value of the gold of the Fed on their balance sheet, divided by $42 an ounce, and then come up with the number of ounces and convert that into tons, it comes out to around 8,000 tons. That's highly interesting because that's how much gold the Treasury currently owns. The Treasury needs at least 8,000 tons of gold to back up the paper certificate it handed the Fed back in the 30s to satisfy the Fifth Amendment. If you take 8,000 tons on the Fed balance sheet in the form of this gold certificate, market to market at 1,300, that amount is around it's over $300 billion. So the secret to the Fed's balance sheet is its hidden gold asset, that gold certificate it received from the Treasury in the 30s. Nobody talks about this or admits to it, but the whole system is based on gold. But what about the gold in Fort Knox? Is it actually there? Now, Jim Rickards is saying that he spoke to people, and he's saying that yes, it is there. Other people have come out and said it is not there whatsoever, and I'm under the impression that it is completely not there whatsoever. This is why we've been raiding other gold vaults in different countries and sending it off and recasting it and sending it off to countries like Germany. So the Fed has never been audited. Fort Knox has not been audited. And we know why they don't want us to audit the Fed or Fort Knox, because they're trying to make gold look unimportant. You don't have to audit unimportant things. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that, yeah, the gold, it's unimportant. We don't need to audit it. It's not a really big deal. It's a barbarous relic, because they're trying to push people away from that and push them towards the dollar. Now, the reason why I don't think there is actually gold in Fort Knox is because what has happened in Germany. Now, we know that Germany they've been repatriating their gold. And there were a couple of pictures that were put up showing the gold coming back, the gold bars with numbers on it. Some have it stamped, some are stamped on the side, and the bars of gold look old. And they're receiving gold from Paris and the U.S. Now, the gold from Paris, well, it looks like it's pretty darn old. It's worn. The numbers are a little bit faded. But the gold that they received from the U.S. looks like it was freshly minted, and they have bright labels on them, which is very interesting in itself. Now, the question is, why did Germany recall all the gold? Why Mnuchin? Why did he go down to Fort Knox and make this really big deal about the gold? Because what is happening here, and we can see it with China and Russia, every single country has been acquiring gold except the United States. Now, they're trying to convince us they don't have to because the gold is already there. He already told you it is safe. because these countries realize when the dollar comes down, they're going to need an insurance policy. That insurance policy is either gold or silver. This is why all the countries are going as quickly as they possibly can to get as much gold as possible. This is why Mnuchin decided to show the American people that everything is fine, and why the United States hasn't been acquiring gold over these many, many years. Well, this shows us that the collapse is coming very, very quickly, because these countries, they're preparing themselves for it. And just by Mnuchin going down there and looking at the gold, this tells us that there is something wrong here. I mean, they would have shown a lot more. I know you can't take pictures in there, but they could have set something up to show the American people that, yes, here it all is. And they would have gone into every single compartment, not just one. So this tells us that we're headed to something catastrophic, where the dollar is going to die. Countries have been acquiring gold. They're going to use it as an insurance policy. China and Russia have been acquiring quite a bit. Germany, they got their gold back ahead of schedule. And the United States is telling everyone, don't worry about it. Everything is fine. This tells us that something big is about to happen. And this is why we've been telling you to get prepared, because we can see from all the different parts of the economic sectors that we've been looking at, they're indicating that this system is completely falling apart. Countries are already moving away from the dollar. So when this thing comes down, it's going to come out that the U.S. really has no gold. Or maybe they have half of what they say, or maybe a quarter of what they say. And this is going to be a complete and utter disaster. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.